The date was February 3rd, 2018. The site of KSI versus Joe Weller and the birth of influencer boxing. In the moment, the importance of that fight was KSI beat Joe, and not a lot of people thought that would happen. But 5 years later, that message has changed. Because yes, KSI winning that fight kicked off the entire influencer boxing scene as we know it today. And I sit here on February 5th, 2023, 5 years later, and tell you that wasn't the most important thing he did that day. The call out after with True Geordie of the Paul family created the problem child, Jake Paul. And while this fight has been talked about and rumored and the potential and wishful thinking and what would happen if, I'm here to tell you 5 years later, this thing is not just what if. Just like the 5-year journey we've been on to get this fight final, why don't we take a journey of our own? KSI versus Jake Paul is absolutely happening, and there's a lot we gotta talk about. But before we do that, that's right guys, Prize Picks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Here's how this all works. You make an account, you use promo code WADE for up to $100 in deposit match bonuses. Use that code, and you pick between 2 and 6 player squares. And these player squares can come from a variety of sports like our favorites, MMA and boxing, or NFL, college football, NBA, college basketball, MLB, hockey, and more. And you can even mix and match players from different sports into one entry. And here comes the fun part. All you have to do is pick more or less than the player square prediction, and then choose whether you want to flex or power play. And that's it. You make your picks, you set your entry amount, and just wait to start making that money. And if that wasn't easy enough, Prize Picks made it even easier by setting a free player square for Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, Chiefs versus Eagles. This player square is Patrick Mahomes throwing for more than half of a yard. And in every career game that Patrick Mahomes has played, he has thrown for more than 1 yard. So that's basically free money waiting on you right there. Sign up now because the Super Bowl is this week and you do not want to miss it. Once again, that is code WADE when you sign up for up to $100 in deposit match bonuses. Prize Picks is operated here in the United States, and in most of those states, you must be 18 or older, 21 plus in Arizona and Massachusetts to play Prize Picks. And guys, when you're doing so, please play responsibly. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into the breakdown. The date was November 9th, 2019 in sunny Los Angeles, California. The fight was KSI versus Logan Paul. And again, this was a story behind the story. Yes, we were focused on Logan and JJ, and while it was the biggest influencer boxing match we'd seen at the time, it was still just another cog in the wheel 5 years later to get to where we are. And then to beating Logan and Jake, having that visceral reaction. You guys remember that? Him in Logan's locker room crying, calling out Shannon Briggs and saying he was a shitty coach and that they didn't do things right, and why didn't they do this, why didn't they do that? That was a brother's love, but also a scorned competitor. He hated that Logan lost that fight for sure, but what Jake hated more was that the Paul name, his legacy, he was attached to that loss. The date was January 30th, 2020. Fresh off his older brother's loss, Jake wanted to get his revenge versus KSI, but to do so, he had to get through the beast from the Middle East and the UK's heir apparent to JJ, Nissan Gibb. And that's where things started to change. Jake Paul isolated himself in Big Bear, California with Coach Shane Mosley. And it's funny now looking back on it because I understood why Jake was in isolation. You know, he's focused on boxing, but now having to do it myself and be kind of isolated for just even a couple of weeks here, all alone in this cold ass frigid environment, it makes me respect even more what Jake was doing and how seriously he was taking this. And it showed when they stepped into the ring together that night in Miami, and Jake was just levels above anything Gibb had ever seen. And again, this created another moment, another chapter in the story of KSI and Jake, as Jake put down Gibb, stood up on the turnbuckle and slashed his throat, flexed on everyone, and pointed down into the crowd. And in the first or second row, I don't remember, KSI in his shades and highlighted braids sat there, slumped in his chair, upset that his friend lost for sure, bummed for Gibb, but more so furious that he's now still associated with the Paul name, because as Thanos once said in the Avengers, he had to do it himself. And while the trash talk wasn't necessarily the greatest in the world, you could see the animosity between the two when KSI came into the ring and stood face to face with Jake. This is the fight we wanted then. It seemed like both guys were free, ready to go on the same path, in the same lane, until both guys hit the blinker and went opposite ways. So Leo, you can just, you can speed up my voice during this part.
JJ started a music career, had some #1 singles, had some top 10s, did some stuff with the Sidemen, signed to another label, made some more hits, signed a vodka deal with the Sidemen, and made a prime drink with Jake Paul's older brother Logan Paul, all while Jake was still boxing. He knocked out NBA star Nate Robinson flat cold and the world took notice. He beat Ben Askren's bag of milk-built body and the world said, hold on a second, and then he knocked out former 5-time MMA champion Tyron Woodley. Everyone started to say, oh no, he's for real. All right, let's resume normal speed because
that brings us to August 27, 2022, as KSI had announced the debut of Misfits Boxing, his own boxing promotion. He also announced his return to the ring. And while for 3 years we really never knew if he'd come back, suddenly that was a reality, just like the dream that we had 3 years earlier, that KSI and Jake would potentially fight, started to become more of a reality. And as KSI did what he was supposed to do, beat 2 fighters in one night, we started to get that feel that we got all the way back in 2019, that KSI and Jake had potential. It maybe could happen. Even myself, I was still pretty skeptical. I said, I don't see it. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Jake is here in the boxing scale while KSI is acting like a Heinz knockoff condiment. In other words, just trying to play catch up. And to double down on it, Jake Paul was about to take on Anderson Silva, the greatest combat sports striker to ever live. And while yes, he was over the hill at 47 years old, he still had the intangibles. He was still dangerous. He was still the most skilled fighter either of them had ever seen. I know people don't want to hear this, but Jake outboxed him and showed another level. So you see, the scale kept tipping. KSI and Jake may happen, it may not. Are the levels too different? We don't know. Will this thing ever happen? And then all of a sudden, KSI fought on Misfits #4 and showed a whole new level. By knocking out Face Temper in the way he did it, and in the amount of time it took, KSI showed not only a new skill, but a new willingness to keep himself cemented in this boxing scene, and in a full circle moment to take down Jake Paul. Which leads us to today, February 5th, 2023. In the last couple of days and weeks, that potential of Jake Paul and KSI, that message of will we ever get that fight? I don't know, maybe so, possibly, has turned into a definite. Yeah, we're going to. As KSI's manager, Mams Taylor, has now said a couple of times, they've sent contracts back and forth between KSI and Jake Paul, despite the fact that both guys do have a fight in front of them, which again is another one of those hurdles and things we have to be careful to overlook, because Jake is fighting Tommy Fury, an undefeated 8 or 9-0 pro boxer as of the current recording, a guy that absolutely poses a threat to Jake's undefeated career and his trajectory going forward, and potentially even a KSI fight, because KSI has said if Tommy beats Jake, KSI is fighting Tommy, not Jake. And on the other side of things, KSI is all but guaranteed to be fighting Joe Fournier, another 9, I think 10, maybe 11-0 boxer. Yes, a little bit older in age, but does have credible wins under his belt. Has shared a ring with world-class boxer David Haye, which was not a fight, more so a friendly spar between 2 friends. But still a credible boxer and a dangerous individual for JJ, and if he should lose that fight, I don't know what happens to the KSI-Jake fight. Sure, it probably still goes on, but still want to see both of them come in undefeated. So we may be jumping the gun just a little bit here, but lower down your M16s and drop your pistols, because I'm an old man and it's gonna take a bit, but this fight's too big to not try and leap over that mother. We'd set up the battle of the mega powers in the ring, but even as of right now today, there's still some fights going on behind the scenes in contract negotiations that we also have to talk about. These two are superstars. Yes, they are the top of their class in this influencer boxing scene. They are going to demand an audience of potentially in the arena 20 to 40 to maybe 50,000 people if you can sell it correctly. But on a press tour of the highest magnitude, this thing can be millions of pay-per-view buys. And because of that, contract negotiations are never going to be easy. And in the last couple of months, we've heard both guys going back and forth on who is the A side of this fight, where will the fight take place, what weight, what venue, who is involved, and this is why you should be even more confident that this fight is stamped, signed, sealed, and delivered, because we're starting to get answers. As recently, once again, as today, both guys have been on Twitter going back and forth, and usually this is not how negotiations are done. This is not how any boxing fight is signed for the most part, but we do live in the social media world, and everything being public does make this a little more interesting. And the biggest issue that's come up between both these two, at least one that now it looks like we can consider done, has been the weight. What weight do these two fight at? While Jake has fought fought predominantly at 191 pounds, coming down to 187 for Anderson, now coming down to 185 for Tommy. KSI, on the other hand, has fought at a ton of different weights. I'm talking 181, 187 to 190, I think, for the Logan fight. Now, 175 for Pineda and Swarms, 175 for FaZe Temper, but his manager, Mams Taylor, a smart negotiator in his own right, has proposed that Jake come down to 170 pounds, which is absolutely not going to happen, but as negotiations go, you start low, then meet in the middle, and that seems to be met, as Jake has now put on Twitter, I agree to fight KSI at 180 pounds, plus his request for a 10-pound rehydration clause, which I don't think is crazy, to be fair. If JJ truly is going to be smaller than 175 pounds, and that's what he's walking around at, I don't know that for sure. I can't take that literally because I haven't seen the man on the scale. I know he's in great shape, but I don't know the poundage there, and especially don't know it when we talk kgs, because your boy was brought up in America where we just ignore the metric system. While the rest of the world uses it, we just ignore it. Kind of like what America does with a lot of issues around the world. But anyway, Jake put a caveat in here, and again, usually these aren't how negotiations are done, but he said it has to be 100% winner takes all like he requested, which is true. KSI did tell Jake he would fight him, but it would be winner take all, loser has nothing, and I guess that's Jake's sticking point. He wants this also to be winner take all. But it does seem like Jake is giving up a bit of a side here, which I'm not necessarily very surprised at. He offered to fight KSI for free after the Alex Wasabi pullout, which no, wasn't realistic, but did come out of his mouth. Now agreeing to KSI's 180 pounds with a 10-pound rehydration clause, it seems as if Jake has given in a little bit to the quote-unquote demands of KSI to make this fight happen, because both guys want it, but someone's gonna have to budge. And Jake's willingness to do that does tell me he absolutely does want this fight, whereas KSI absolutely wants control of what this fight's gonna be, and Jake being a bigger guy, he doesn't want to have to meet him there. He wants this fight, but under his terms, and it looks like he's gonna get his way there. So what else do we really have to talk about here? Looks like, again, outside of two big hurdles in front of both guys, this fight is all set to go. Signed, sealed, delivered. And outside of setting the undercard, which I've heard could be a combination of misfits and MVP fighters, I don't know how that'll work out because most MVP fighters are high-level professional boxer, championship-level boxers, whereas misfits is doing more so of the influencer entertainment boxing route and not necessarily championship-level boxers throughout that roster. But it does seem like a co-promotion is on the table, and with that being said, there's really no other questions to answer here other than, would Logan Paul fight on this card? Maybe in a co-main spot? It looks like he wants to come back and fight as of, again, another post that he put out today. But outside of that, the only real question left is the one we've had from the beginning. How does this fight go? Who is the better boxer? Because at the end of the day, while this is the influencer boxing scene, this will not come down to who's the better influencer, who's more entertaining, or who has more fans. Whether you think KSI is the greatest entertainer in the world, or you think Jake Paul is the greatest fight promoter in the world, none of that shit matters one bit. What does matter is what no one wants to admit about this scene, but truly is the main factor of what drives it, and that is, as entertaining as some people are, it's a massive portion of this puzzle, and it's what's gonna bring new eyeballs to this fight. As entertaining as Jake and KSI are, as much of a fan base as they hold, it won't matter at all as much as who is the better boxer. Who's dedicated the time in the boxing gym, whose skill has risen to the level of superior to everyone in our scene, and ultimately, who wins this fight. Both KSI and Jake have their flaws and their strengths that we have a lot of time to break down, but this initial video is for you guys. This isn't the end of influencer boxing, but the sun is absolutely setting on this chapter, and it's the greatest one we've ever seen. When December finally gets here, and in one corner stands KSI and his fans and the promotion he built from the ground up in Misfits Boxing, looks across the ring at his arch nemesis, the problem child, Jake Paul, and his fans and the promotion he built from the ground up supporting the pro boxing scene, MVP. There'll only be one question left to settle. Who's the better boxer? We got 10 months left, and I guess we'll find out.